welcome to today's Media Mentor session. I'm Dolly Wolf. I'm the founder of One Day Immersion in Media, Entertainment, and Technology. Really appreciate your support, and I think it's so well worth your time to hear great career advice and learn about different roles in the industry that you may not hear in the classroom or otherwise. So I'm really excited about this team who's joining us today. So today's session features members of the development team from 9 Story Media Group. They're a leading creator, producer, and distributor of award-winning animated and live action content for audiences around the world. That's pretty cool. The session is led by Sarah Wallendjack, Vice President of Production and Development, and she's an executive producer. She is joined by Development Coordinator Yunah Chung, a graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, and I think this is kind of fun to mention that she was selected for an inaugural comedy screenwriting fellowship through Whoop Inc., which is Whoopi Goldberg's production company. That's very cool. And then also development assistant Crystal Williams, a graduate of Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. And a fun tip about Crystal is that she was accepted into Norway's prestigious post-grad fellowship specializing in documentary and sound design. Sarah Wallendjack is a leading producer and distributor of family and kids content. She is the supervising producer of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, executive producer of Super Y on PBS, and is the executive producer of Charlie Colorform City, which is a new series launching on Netflix next year. She was the president of the Children's Media Association and worked on Nickelodeon's Wonder Pets, Disney's Go Baby, and Disney's Johnny and the Sprites. She's a graduate of American University's Visual and Media and Arts Cultural Management programs. So 3 super talented, accomplished women in media who we'll be hearing and seeing more from them. This is, the more I read, the more I learn. The wonderful call that we had in preparation for today's session is mind-blowing on what these folks do and how they get content to us. So with that, I'd love for everybody to welcome Sarah, Yunah, and Crystal of 9 Story Media Group.
So I think we can start. We have a deck prepared, so I'll start sharing my screen, and we actually have like a little video to show in the beginning.
This is gonna be fun! Come on, let's go!
All aboard!
Oh, I'm so excited!
Yeah!
Was awesome!
I'm okay!
So that's kind of just a little sizzle of all the shows that we do. And so we are the New York Animation Development Team. And then I'm the development assistant. I support Sarah and another development VP. And then we have Yunah, and we also have, Yunah is our development coordinator. And she supports animation and also our live action VP. And then we have Sarah, who is our wonderful VP of production and development. And so I'll just kind of start this of kind of telling everyone just a little bit about myself and kind of how I got started. My background is actually music and music industry. I went to Oneonta and I studied music industry and audio production. And I was really kind of pushed to do like this audio kind of track, and I took this one class that was like sound design and animation, and I really loved it. And I came back upstate. All of my internships were in audio. And so when I graduated, I tried to find a job in audio, and I begged people to work for free, and nobody would let me work for free. So I kind of was like, well, I need to be able to get into something. And so I just kind of decided to broaden my horizons and say, well, what audio jobs can I get just in the industry? And so I kind of looked towards television, and I started off working at Spectrum News as an associate producer and a producer. And while I was there, I kind of noticed that everybody had like another passion, you know, which I thought was really interesting because we work in a news station, and I always thought like, well, if you want to be an anchor, you're just going to be an anchor, and it's going to be like this really passionate this thing that people are passionate about. But when I got there, like all the anchors were like, I wanted to be like a musician, or I wanted to be on Broadway, and all the producers were like, I wanted to be a writer. And so I was kind of like, well, maybe this isn't it. Maybe I need to like do something kind of different. So I decided to go back to grad school. And so I went to Syracuse University to get my master's in television, radio, and film. And while I was there, I still focused in sound design, but I learned just a lot about television. And when I was ready to graduate, everyone was just really freaked out, and I didn't know where to go. So a teacher kind of approached me to see if I wanted to do a fellowship abroad. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Why not? So I had 1 month to kind of get myself together after graduating. And I kind of went to Norway, not really knowing what that experience was going to be about. But I knew that I still really loved television. So even though I was there to do this kind of music fellowship, I kind of decided to look elsewhere. And so I was like, well, I found this high profile production documentary company, and I like forced them to like give me some apprenticeship and just to kind of teach me about how to make documentaries. And One Day Immersion kind of like plays like a really big part in just like my overall background. When I was in Syracuse University, I would come down all the time to go to the events. I kind of forced Dolly to like be my mentor, and I just kind of asked her if she would mentor me. And so I stayed in touch with her for the whole year that I was in Norway. And I saw that there was just a lot of things to do. So I think I signed up for just a few opportunities, and I got this mentorship. I won something, I won a competition, and I got a mentorship. And it was this guy that worked in development in New York. And I just kept in touch with him throughout the whole year. And when I got back to New York, I went down to see him, and he gave me my first internship in development. And so I was kind of decided to stick around New York and see what was out there. I knew that I had some limitations, and I couldn't just be like a PA and make like $10 an hour. Like I had to like afford like to be able to live in New York. So I kind of said, well, with my experience being a producer and with all of my other experiences, what can I do? And a lot of people start off as being an assistant. So I said, okay, well, great. I'll find an assistant position in media and kind of go from there. So I found a temp position at this place called In Demand. And I was there for about 3 months just doing temp work. And I saw that they had an assistant position open for the CFO and SVP of programming. And I kind of bugged them and forced them to hire me. And they did. And I stayed there for 2.5 years. And then after that, I kind of decided, I think there's something more to like my dream, and I think I need to figure it out. So I started applying for jobs and networking, and I eventually came across this position at 9 Story Media Group, and I interviewed, and apparently they loved me enough that they hired me. So that's kind of the gist about me. So I'll pass it off to Yunah.
Thanks, Crystal. I love hearing your trajectory, even though I've heard it several times. In general, I think I just love hearing about how everyone's dots connect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Yunah, and I'm a development coordinator here at 9 Story in New York City. Crystal, Sarah, and I make up the small but mighty development arm in New York. And as a development coordinator, I'm juggling several responsibilities. I oversee some projects on our development slate, and I make sure that they're moving along. I also write coverage on submissions that we receive. We'll talk about coverage a little more later on in this presentation, but it's basically reviewing materials and determining whether it's a good project and fit for us to take on. As a development coordinator, I'm also in constant communication with in-house creators, external creators, and keeping an eye out for up-and-coming BIPOC voices, usually writers and directors. No day is the same, and I love that we're in the business of telling stories to children. So that's sort of a little bit on what I do now at 9 Story. As far as how I got here, it wasn't the most linear path, but there rarely is one in this business, and I think having some zigzag is ultimately a good thing. So as Dolly mentioned, I graduated from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. I majored in film and television with a concentration in screenwriting, and I minored in entertainment business. During my undergrad, I interned for an Emmy Award-winning indie documentary filmmaker at Magnetic Arts. I also interned at WNET Channel 13, and I worked with the Cyber Chase team. Cyber Chase is an animated children's series that teaches math fundamentals. I also interned at the BBC in London during my study abroad stint, and during my senior year, I interned at ABC Daytime, where I watched a ton of General Hospital, The Chew, and The View. So after I graduated, I worked briefly at Creative Artists Agency in New York. I was an admin assistant, and I worked in the mailroom and the front desk. Long story short, it wasn't my cup of tea, and I never had a desire to become a talent agent, so I decided to give LA a try, and it was there that I gained my first-hand look at the world of development. I was a scripted current and development assistant at MTV, and after MTV, I dabbled in some freelance writing. I recapped Korean dramas at dramabeans.com, and as Dolly mentioned, I completed a comedy screenwriting fellowship at Webisode. And then, after feeling disillusioned with Hollywood and the US, I decided to fly all the way to Singapore and Tokyo to pursue dual international MBA degrees. And I have to say it was a welcome change of pace. I made lots of new friends who came from all walks of life, and I also interned at the local film studio that produced Crazy Rich Asians. And so after completing my international MBA program, I returned home, started applying for jobs, and I guess the stars aligned for me and 9 Story. And after working in the primetime YA and international cinema space, I'm now able to build my creative muscle for children's content at 9 Story, and it's been a really fun ride. And now over to our fabulous VP of Production and Development, Sarah.
Thank you, Yunah. I am one of the most fortunate people to have such an amazing team working side by side with me in development, and yes, there is a lot of love on this team. I think there's a lot of passion and energy. You can tell we all really enjoy getting up and going to work every day. it certainly has its challenges, but I think that we challenge each other, and it comes out in the work, making it better and stronger. So thank you both. I think that Dolly did a really nice summary of my career path, and I think I'll highlight a couple of things. I was very fortunate that in high school, the Muppet Show was rebooted, one of the many times it had been rebooted. And I remember sitting there trying to think about what was I going to do when I grew up, and I knew I really loved theater and television and creative things. And I remember just watching a penguin fly across the screen, and I thought to myself, oh, someone had to throw that, and someone had to catch that, and there were probably a bunch of other people around them filming this, and there are puppets there. That's what I want to do. I want to work in children's television. Ideally, I want to be on the set of the Muppet Show, just doing really weird things and have not every day be the same. And so I set a course. I went to college sort of knowing I wanted to work in children's media, mostly for the fun and creative reasons of it. And in college, I took a class. I took a children's media class, and I read The Tipping Point. And it was in this class that I learned for the first time that Sesame Street was not intended solely for me, that it was meant to close an educational barrier. And I just was sort of impacted by the ability for this media to have such meaning and move the needle on issues that are important for kids. And at that point, I was hooked, and I've been singularly focused wanting to work in children's media, preschool media specifically. And so just to sort of preface, I think the three of us have diverse backgrounds and how we got here. I love, Yunah, your description of the zigzagginess. But I think everyone has a different path to how they end up where they end up. And yes, I've been very grateful to sort of wind my way around. Anyway, I knew very clearly this is what I wanted to do. I was lucky enough to end up interning for Henson for a summer. I was able to find a production company where everything animated happened under one roof, from pitching an idea for a story all the way through to post-production. So we had animators and designers and writers and voiceover actors and editors. Everything happened under one roof. So it's really where I got my education and how television was made for kids. Anyway, I was going to say my perspective on what we're going to talk about today really is coming from a history of a career in children's content. And so some things I'll say with absolute certainty about working, and just to preface it, that it's in the children's arena. And also the content we make is driven with purpose, and we attach a curriculum and a message to the content we're making. That's not an absolute for all children's television, but it's something that we're going to speak about a little bit today, about what drives our development and content. So I've had the joy of working on live action and animation projects. My career trajectory is a little like, I found an internship at the studio, Little Airplane Productions, where they were working on the Wonder Pets, and I held on to that opportunity with white knuckles and refused to let go until there was another opportunity for me. And as Crystal said, looking across the landscape and saying, how do I get my foot in the door? An entry-level position, an assistant-level position, figuring out a way where you can be at a place where you're absorbing all the information, you have access to everything happening, was a really great place to start. And you demonstrate yourself as a committed, hard, smart worker, and you're able to climb that ladder within a company or move over once you have more experience. And so that's my path. That one position led to the next one by being there at the perfect balance of timing and opportunity and hard work. And then the other way that you sort of hop into these opportunities is you go and you write that screenplay and you get that award, and you find your friends and you self-produce it, or like there are other entry points in where you demonstrate your creative, abilities, and it's one way to sort of skip a few rungs on that ladder, but my experience has really been one at a time. So I was very fortunate 13 and a half years ago to be called upon by this team at Out of the Blue to help produce Super Y, a literacy show for PBS. And I've been at this company for 13 and a half years working on a variety of projects. And, you know, more opportunities happening while I sit in this seat, and being able to grow within a company. That's somewhat rare. I've been very fortunate that that's been my particular path. But yes, we've produced over 103 episodes of Super Y, and I've worked on Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and Charlie's Colorform City, mostly developing them into production and staying with them through production. And now, since the company was acquired by 9 Story Media Group, I sit in the development department with these two amazing women, and we get to come up with new shows for kids who probably haven't even been born yet. So, and the other thing that I attribute success in this industry or any industry, I have 3 things that have served me well. One is to find a mentor. And I think, Crystal, you touched on this a bit. I think it's really important. There are people out there who do want to help and who do want to support. And I think strengthening those relationships and finding those people is integral. I was very fortunate to have an amazing woman mentor me and help me find my path and help me, you know, answer big questions. The other is build that network. I think this is another opportunity. You guys are doing an amazing thing by being here today. You're building your network by meeting us. We're going to share our contact information at the end. But it's a small industry of people who work in children's media, who develop children's media. We're there. I think it's a supportive network. And I think if you meet someone, hold on and retain those relationships and build that network. It's very important. And the other one is just to be kind, because I think a big piece of this is being someone other people want to work with. And when you are kind, the phone calls and the opportunities seem to follow through. I mean, in addition to the hard work, but I think that's very important that it is a small industry. It is a small group, and, you know, who we are as individuals is important, is equally to the work that we do. Especially when we're doing work for kids. And then the only other piece of information I'll share is that this time is for you. And so we're going to leave a big chunk at the end for Q&A, and we would, you know, love to be here and answer any questions that you have. So I think from here, I'm going to toss it off to Crystal, and we're going to talk a little bit, or toss it off to you, or am I going to talk a little bit more about 9 Story?
You're going to talk a little bit more about 9 Story.
Exactly. I'm going to talk a little bit more about 9 Story. So we'll do this pretty briefly. You saw our beautiful animation reel, but 9 Story is a leading creator, producer, and distributor of award-winning animation and live-action content for kids. We have, I think you can go to the next slide, but we have 1,100 employees in 5 studios. We have 2D animation capabilities in Toronto and Manchester. We have CG capabilities in Dublin and Bali. We're doing mixed media live action on a series called Blues, Clues, and You, which is in production in Toronto. It's amazing sort of amalgamation of all live action 2D and CG coming together. And then in New York, where the 3 of us sit, we do a lot of writing, research, show creation and development, ideation there as well. A lot of producers, writers, and researchers sit in our studio in New York. And then in addition, the beauty of this company is that we have 1,100 employees. Probably that number has changed from last year, but quite a number of employees nationwide. And we also have a distribution department where shows that are finished, shows that we finish, we distribute to other places that will air them. We do acquisitions, so sometimes we'll purchase a library of content and be able to sell that off in addition to the content that we're making. And we do our own intellectual property. That's what the 3 of us focus on, or content that we own and create ourselves. We also do co-production work. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is a great example of that. We partner with the Fred Rogers Company to produce that series together. And then we do service work for shows like The Octonauts and Doc McStuffins. Disney hires us. They have their creators, and they use our animation services. And so we're not working on the development of those shows, but we animate them. So that's a global perspective of this company. Creative affairs, the three of us work on the creative affairs team. And again, that's the work that we're doing in New York. So we are developing intellectual property, meaning things that the company will own and distribute and sell. And we really put a focus on content that impacts the lives of our audience. All right. This is Angela Santamero is our Chief Creative Officer. She is the creator of Blue's Clues and Blue's Clues and You, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, Creative Galaxy, Wish and Poof, Charlie's Colorform City, and many more. And this is her North Star statement. We create media that challenges, empowers, educates, and entertains children while making them laugh. It is not lost on any of us in our studio in New York that when you're creating content for children, it is a big responsibility in addition to a wonderful opportunity. We know that the content we make for kids is, it can leave a lasting impact. It can also do harm. You can misinform as well as inform. And so we work really hard to challenge ourselves and make sure that these stories are going to resonate and empower and entertain and educate. And we have a lot of measures in place just to make sure that we're modeling good behavior and being really responsible. Content takes a lot of time, a lot of talented people, a lot of money to make. And to waste our stories on ones that are not responsible is irresponsible. And it's also, you know, our shows, when they do well, are broadcast to millions and millions of children. And so there's a huge opportunity. What do we want to say? It should be important. And so these are the things that we come back to when we think about where to go next with our storytelling, our development, and our show creation. Great, so I covered this a little bit, but as I mentioned, we create our own IP. We work with broadcasters, Amazon, Nickelodeon, Netflix, Cartoon Network, etc. We have a team of experts who are child development experts. Angela Santamero has written a book called Preschool Clues, which I highly recommend. It was a book written for parents so they could identify the care that's put into certain television shows and help them identify what shows are good are valuable and educational and rich for their kids. But I also think it's a great masterclass for media makers with best practices. And then as a result of our pipeline and our methods and the way that we go about creating content, we've seen really wonderful results, from studies that actually prove that we're teaching children to read with shows like Super Why, high ratings. Some of us have beautiful gold Emmy statues sitting somewhere in our apartments and offices. Yes, we're very proud of the work that we do. All right, Crystal, I think I'm going to help toss this to you so you can answer. So what's development?
So what's development? I thought this was like a really important question to ask. I did a panel with One Day Immersion a few weeks ago, and I realized that not a lot of people know what development is, or they don't know like there's a difference between writing and developing. So we are going to tell you like how development is for us. And so development is the process of identifying and fleshing out new ideas and formats for TV and film, packaging them for sales to broadcasters. So we kind of develop projects, which means fleshing out scripts, Bibles, and kind of packaging it in a way, and then we go out to markets to try to sell the property. So this is actually kind of like the first step of my position is submissions. And so this is kind of like a little bit about our development process. So I'm the first person of contact. So what will happen is a creator or somebody that has an idea, they'll say, hey, are you taking pitches? And they'll pitch us like whatever their show idea is. When a pitch comes in, we usually do coverage. And basically coverage it's something that I do, it's something Yunah does, Sarah does it at every stage in development. You kind of need to do coverage, but also just perfect. It's basically a perfection like of your judgment of a property. So what you'll have is kind of like a overall synopsis of like what the story is about. And then below you'll write your thoughts on it, and you'll give a recommendation of a pickup, a maybe, or a pass. And projects we can recommend a pickup, or we can pass it on a variety of a different reasons. So one reason could be the story engine wasn't that great, or we don't really see this going to a second season, or another reason could be, oh, we're already developing a show like this. Another one could be, well, this is kind of like too expensive for animation, or we just don't really see it fitting in, and it doesn't really make sense. So there's a lot of reasons like why a project could pass. If we recommend pickup, which is very rarely, it's kind of like a very small percentage that we actually do recommend pickup. We meet with the creator to gain better insight into their vision and what they kind of are, what they're trying to do with the project. And I would say that's actually very important to us, is that we want to work with really strong creators that have a strong vision. And because you have to marry, animation takes such a long time that you have to be, was it Angela says, you have to be, are you ready to marry this project for 10 years? And animation takes such a long time that you need to love the idea, but we need to love it enough where we're excited to it and where we can pitch this. And I think I said this prior in the last panel, is that you should kind of look at yourself like that. Like, if you don't love something, like, why would anybody else love it? So when you're pitching yourself, like, should pitch yourself in a way where, you know, people are going to love you. Because if you don't love you, why would anybody else love you? So after we kind of decide to pick up and we meet the creators and we love them, we kind of go into like an option negotiation where we kind of figure out what the best deal is between us and the creator. And then we kind of work on kind of prepping their materials, and that could be like pairing them with a writer and writing a script or getting an animation test. But we package just a bunch of information, and then we go to, well, when the world was turned on, we would go to like Kidscreen, a whole bunch of these other markets, and we would pitch it. But now we do a lot of virtual pitching. And then hopefully we get a green light. And then once we get a green light, we kind of hand it off to production, and then starts the process. I will go on to the next slide. Yunah, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure. Thanks, Crystal. So for every single story that crosses our desk, we ask ourselves these 3 questions. Why this show, why now, and why you? And it really always comes down to these questions. In a vast sea of ideas, we want to make sure that the show that we take on and produce is the right one for us. And as Crystal mentioned, animation is a years-long journey, so it wouldn't make sense to produce something that we don't love, right? I feel like we really strive to be very intentional and thoughtful in our development approach, and we also expect that from the creators as well. So from your script or pitch deck, can we sense that there is a genuine connection to the story you're telling? Or does it feel like you're co-opting someone else's story? In light of all that's happening in the world, in race relations, politics, and current affairs, do we see a need for this story? Is there a white space? These are all the things that we think about. After all, our audience is children, and they're our future. Children's TV is a very fun and rewarding space, but we do take things very seriously here. And then I'm going to pass back to Crystal.
Well, I'm going to pass it to Sarah.
Okay.
Hot potato. Yeah, so I think that one of the big lessons as people start working in development is how many things we say no to versus what we say yes to. And also how many times a project maybe heard a no before it heard a yes, and what it takes in order to get that yes through. And, you know, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, it was a 5-year journey before we had gotten a green light and were able to start production. And that was a show that, you know, for every purpose, PBS had reached out to the Fred Rogers Company and said, we're not going to be having as much airtime for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and we're looking for another socio-emotional show, and you're the partners we want to talk to about this. And from the moment that, you know, like they knew that the PBS was looking for this specific content, and they worked with Angela to create this content. We had support. People were eager to move this along the way. But it's a journey, and that, I think, was pretty fast of how quickly that happened. And even, you know, when I think that things are happening quite quickly, it takes a really long time. It takes many, many years for some projects to actually get made. There's an amazing story about Ready, Jet, Go, which is on PBS. And I think that was a 15-year journey that particular project took. It started at Cartoon Network and was developed there by the head of their development team. And then she left, and the project was tabled. And, you know, like, there's just all of these iterations that particular show took before it was able to get that green light and say, now is the time. It looks so very different than it did in the beginning of that story, but they persisted. And I think the way that, and I'm sort of prefacing the slide with that, because in the vein of Crystal's marriage proposal analogy, it needs to be so clear to you what the answers are to what Yunah was speaking of, why the show, why now, why you. And I think, you know, the answers to those questions fall into these categories. I think if you're passionate about this, if it's very clear why you want to tell this story, why this story needs to be told, why it needs to be told right now, making sure that it looks different than anything out there. We often talk about the sea of options that children have today in the content that they can create. And we really want them to, we want to offer something different, because if other people are doing it well, then there's other needs that we want to pursue. I think for this audience, we're often reminded, simple, clear, just get to the point. These kids are there, they're in it. It doesn't need a lot of exposition and a lot of backstory. And then, you know, just going back to intention and thoughtfulness in your execution. It's just, how do you make this idea so strong? And we sometimes talk about a tree, because people are going to try and push that tree down. There's going to be strong winds, and the stronger the core of that trunk is, the stronger and the intentionality of where we put that tree, it's harder to push it down with like a subtle question. And people will ask questions all the time. I think the running story is that Dora was originally about a bunny rabbit getting mail, and that was the pilot script, and that's not what the show is at all today. People are going to ask, could Blue, you know, Blue's Clues, Blue was originally a cat. And Angela tells the story of when she was told they had another property with a cat, she couldn't have a cat show. And, you know, she thought, I'm ruined. It can't be anything else other than this cat. And Tracy Page Johnson, who voices Blue and co-created Blue, started drawing a little dog. And Angela said, oh, it could be a dog. This isn't the end of this story. So anyway, it's a rocky roller coaster in development. And I think by really having these answers concretely in your own mind, the project is stronger for it. All right.
Yeah, so this is kind of like criteria for, I think, a festival. And these are really good questions, like if you have a project or if you have an idea, kind of to look at some of these questions and kind of see, does your, you know, can you answer them with your idea? Yeah, it's just there as reference. And so we have some like kind of like some closing thoughts of like our advice. So I will go through mine, and I'll let Sarah and Yunah go through theirs. Be resourceful like in your job search, and don't be afraid to take that perfect job. I think that everyone has to start somewhere, and if we were all rich and could afford, have our parents pay for apartments in New York, and they knew somebody who could get us our first job, like that would be great. But if you're not on that level, don't let it deter you. Like, you just got to be resourceful. You got to look everywhere. And I think, schools have you kind of, you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this. And for me, like when I moved to New York, I had to find a job. Like I couldn't just wait around for someone to hire me. And so when I moved to New York, I was waiting tables, and I was just kind of like throwing up my resume like on different places. And then I got this call from like this random temp agency in New York, and they were like, oh, like we have this temp job. And I was like, they're like, it's an immediate. They're like, I can't tell you anything about it, but come to our office and we'll explain it. And so I went to their office, and they're like, it's at this place called In Demand, which is a joint venture between Comcast, Charter, and Cox. And I was like, oh, like this is really cool. And then kind of through those years of like working in that kind of like distribution SVOD space, I kind of learned that all of these companies, AMC, NBC, they're such big corporations, they're HR, they can't just interview every single person. There are going to be like these little temp jobs that they're like, listen, like we're just going to hire a temp agency, and then we're going to have that temp agency just fill those positions. And there's tons of positions out there. And so my suggestion is to, if you have to find a job, be resourceful, talk to different people, reach out to different people. Another thing that I would say is research the company before interviewing and before talking to somebody. And I would say, like, I'm extreme and I'm also OCD. Yunah and Sarah both know this. So when I had my interview for 9 Story, I was like, I'm going to research them enough to like, and the industry enough to like where I can have just a conversation like we're having now. I don't have to look at my notebooks. So I like was reading stuff for like 8 hours the night before, because I needed to be able to, what if someone asked me a question about like the FCC and children's media? I wanted to be able to have a clear conversation with them. And I think that kind of gave me just the confidence to be able to walk into an interview and be like, I know what you're doing. I know what space you're in and what industry you're in, and I can answer all these questions. And then I would say one of the last things is speak up. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask for coffee or for advice. And I'll give you just one last story, is that when I was in Norway, when I went to Norway, I was broke because I was a college student. And and when I went there, everyone was kind of like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, you can find a job. Like, it's fine. And I was just like, that's weird. Like, how can I find a job in another country that easy? And when I got there, they were like, yeah, like you can't find a job in Norway because you need to know Norwegian. And I was like, that's never going to happen. And I need money. And so I was really I hung out with the international community, and I would say like in that culture, like you have to keep reaching out. So when I would apply for a job, I would reach out every single day to follow up. And it just got to a point I would be telling my friends, I was like, listen, this is weird. Like, I would never do this in the US. And I was like, I just feel like I'm being inappropriate. And they're like, okay, don't reach out. But they said to me, every single time you don't reach out, remember that someone else is reaching out. And it kind of clicked in me, like, if I'm so afraid to reach out to somebody, like I can't be mad that I'm not getting opportunities. Like, I need to have that courage to say, this is who I am, this is what I want. And if I'm not doing that, then I better believe that there is someone else out there that has the courage to do that, and they're going to get the job and I'm not. So I would say that's my advice. I will hand it off to Yunah.
Thanks, Crystal. I think we want to leave some room for questions. So I'll run through my advice very quickly. Keep a pulse on the industry. And by that, I mean read the trades. There's Hollywood Reporter, there's Kidscreen, there's Deadline. And if you have Twitter, there's a thriving film and TV community on there. And I follow the creators that I respect. And I encourage everyone to continue to watch content, read everything you can, from newspapers to books to scripts, poetry, and exercise your creative muscle to hone your unique voice. And to find your people who can take a look at your work and give honest, constructive feedback. And as a creative, it's not easy to share your personal work with others. It can be scary, but I think it's incredibly helpful to get multiple buy-ins and figure out what's working, what's resonating with readers, and what's not working. So finish that draft, make mistakes, clean up that storyboard, polish up that animatic, and have something that you can show to others. And whatever it is, it might just be your calling card. And find comfort in the fact that there's no one straight path to where you want to be. As I mentioned earlier, my path was very zigzaggy. Everyone's tends to be that way, and it's okay. Just trust in time and the process and your efforts.
Great, and I think I covered my big 3 takeaway pieces of advice, and I would just leave it with this industry is looking to you. We need you. We are in need of thoughtful new voices to continue to bring new stories to this media world, and we're rooting for you. And I think the children's media community is very supportive. And, you know, back to Crystal's point, I think when you don't reach out, there are opportunities missed. And I think that the worst thing that could happen is if you reach out and ask for someone to give you some guidance or advice or support, they might say no, or they might not answer. But think of the wonderful things that could happen if they say yes and they do answer. But we're looking to you as our next storytellers, and very excited to see where you're going to go. So I hope that as you approach and take those brave steps, and your next steps is that there is a lot of support, I think, and hope that the next generation is going to push the limits and break new boundaries and tell beautiful, wonderful stories. So I think that, you know, this time is yours. We're here for you. I know it's not a lot of time, but we will make sure you have our contact information, and would be happy to set up additional informational interviews. But yeah, I'd love to open it up, Dolly, to the floor, and see if anybody else has any questions, or there's anything we didn't cover that you'd like us to.
Yeah, no, that was terrific. If anyone has a question, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, yes, I actually do have a question specifically for Yunah. I'm currently majoring in arts and entertainment management, and I'm a sophomore, and I have a few different interests in the creative field, but one of them is talent management, and I'm kind of trying to gauge as much information as I can on the difference between boutique and larger agencies. And I know you said you interned at CAA and it wasn't your cup of tea, so I just wanted to know why you didn't like it so much, just for future reference.
Sure. So I didn't intern there, I actually worked there. So I was staff, and you can read up about like the big 3 or the big 4, CAA, WME, UTA, and generally speaking, no one has a great time working there, because you start out at the bottom, you're in the mailroom, and you're manning reception, and you're dealing with talent agents who are hotshot agents representing like A-list talent, and so they have very big egos, and it's a very fast-paced business where deals can drop or new deals can form. And so oftentimes the stress and frustration that agents experience, they let it out on their assistants, and then the assistants will let it out on other assistants. So I found the culture there to be a bit toxic, I would recommend that you look up the hashtag #PayUpHollywood, and you'll also read some more horror stories that other former assistants have experienced. I know that my story wasn't as bad. I know people that have been hit on the head with a stapler by their boss. And so, yeah, that's sort of the stuff that you'll find in like the bigger talent talent agencies. For the boutique ones, I think the culture is a little less toxic because it's a smaller, and that management companies are a little less harsh, but everyone's experience varies. And so I think you might want to consider the manager route, because when you work at a management company, you do read a lot of scripts, and managers tend to sort of guide writers on their career path. And so it's a little more creative. And I know that some managers can also work as producers for shows. But yeah, if you want to become a talent agent, then you probably should start out at a talent agency. But just know that it's not very glamorous at the bottom.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Crystal, Yunah, and Sarah, for this informative talk. I had a question specifically for Sarah. As part of your suggestions, you mentioned finding a mentor, and I was going to ask what you would recommend in terms of like who to approach and how to approach them, especially if you're not coming from, let's say, film school.
Yeah, the trick about a true mentorship, I mean, I think there are a lot of programs that are looking to pair people up, but in my experience, the beauty of mentorship is building a long-standing relationship. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you need to plant a seed and water it and grow. And I think you start by finding somebody in the industry that you really admire, that you want to learn from, and you ask for a little bit of their time. And then you foster and you nurture that relationship, right? Because I find that now at a stage where I have people that I do mentor, I learn quite a bit from them. It's advantageous for me to stay in contact with people who are aware of different technologies, are looking at different content, or are finding information in different ways than I am. It opens my eyes as well. And so I think that you start by just building that network and meeting people, and the people that you really admire, you're kind, and you build a relationship, right? Where I think, like, you know, calling somebody up and saying, hey, I need a mentor is a different tactic and approach. And I think that the successful relationships I've seen build over time. I think also, you know, back to Yunah's point of interview the company as they interview you as you look. I think if you are going to get a position in a mailroom as an intern, you know, and you're going to be doing work that, you know, isn't glamorous, isn't the exciting things that you think that you want to be doing, you should be learning from people. That's what you're paying. That's really the payment that you're getting. You're learning from people who you admire. And I think it's really important to be thoughtful about who you want to learn from, who you want to be mentoring you. Who at that company that you're working for are you inspired by, and you want to learn how they got there and grow in their shadow and grow up with them. I think that's really important. But there's certainly a lot of mentorship programs of people that are pairing them. The Children's Media Association, which is a resource I recommend to any of you looking for work in children's media. They have an active job board, as does 9 Story Media Group. We do have we post all of our open positions on our website. But they have an active mentorship program, and their strategy is a 9-month relationship where they ask you to meet with your mentee twice a month. And I think that's a really great strategy if you're building a long-lasting relationship, right? You're setting goals, you're carving out time. So that's a little bit more structured and formal, but I think the real secret to the success of that is the longevity and building a relationship that's going to last for a long time.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I have a question. Thank you for being here, first of all. My question is, so in the midst of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, are you looking to develop shows that are focused on socio-emotional skills, addressing children's traumas, or shows that are working towards closing the even more widened education gap?
Yes. Yes, all of those things. I think that we've been very fortunate that working in animation, subscriptions and children watching content has increased, and so there's been a high demand for the kind of content that we're making. But also animation, you know, if I get the money and have a script, if it's committed to, right, all the development work has been done, we have designs, it still takes over a year and a half from that moment that the check hits the bank and we're being told you can just go and make your TV before it ends up on air. It could be a year and a half. And so we're always thinking about the children then. I think in live action, there are other ways. I think we've seen from the media industry a lot of really nimble ways that people responded to how to address children about COVID and Black Lives Matter. I look to Sesame Street as using their relationship with CNN in a really beautiful way. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood released a COVID-19 special. It's the fastest piece of content we've ever produced. It was kind of insane, but still it came out 2 months ago, I think, and so not in the height in the moment. But I think that that's one of the things that 9 Story really prides itself in, is keeping an eye on where children are and the tools that they need. We are keeping a keen eye to the socio-emotional skills and tools children need in these weird times. I think what was really beautiful in this moment of of COVID, looking back at Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, how many of the stories and the strategies and the lessons that we could pull on as being useful for kids in this moment. And I think that there's been, Black Lives Matter, there's been a real awakening for so many reasons on so many levels. And I think it's absolutely happening in the children's media world, looking for more representation behind the camera as well as in front of the camera, and adding that third question, why you? Why are you telling this story? Because we've always known that the stories that are close to you and meaningful to you are the most powerful. They give you the most clarity and vision of how to move something forward. Yes, so the answer is yes. I think that's one of the reasons I've stayed at this company for so long, is because we ask those questions a lot. And it's hard to be really nimble in animation and in the work that we do, because it does take so much time. But yes, we're always looking for that. And I think that's another call to action of all of you, of storytellers, where you see opportunities. There are ways to make animated content that takes 2 years to get on air, and there are ways to respond to things much, much faster. And as you've seen in parents are finding content, brands are being built on Instagram feeds. It's really an interesting time to see how the industry has reacted and how new voices and new content creators have used the challenges of this moment and turned them into opportunities. I hope that answered your question.
No, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. First, I want to say thank you for giving such an informative presentation. It was also really awesome to see shows mentioned that I remember watching when I was younger. But I just wanted to ask if any of you thought there might be good resources for internships with someone that doesn't have a lot of experience or may not be 100% sure what path they are thinking of taking.
Crystal and Yunah, I'm going to pass that to the two of you. I struggle a little bit. We have had remote interns via other programs, but 9 Story does not have a robust internship, an internship program.
I would look everywhere. Like, there's Indeed, there's LinkedIn, and because I follow a lot of film and TV people on Twitter, I find that there are lots of opportunities on there as well. And there is a thing called the UTA job list, and that also contains lots of internship opportunities, but I usually find lots of postings on LinkedIn.
And then I would say, like, I know a lot of people go to these big companies. Like, everyone wants to be a page at the NBC. Everyone wants to work at these big companies. But sometimes, like, if you start at a small company, it's kind of a lot better because you can get your foot in the door. People actually answer your emails. You don't every single time you send like an application, it kind of goes into a void at Disney or a void at NBC. And so I would say, you know, don't just reach out to like the top, you know, 5 companies. Like there's so many production companies that, you know, there's a lot of entry points.
And
Thank you so much.
Speaking specifically about children's content, the Children's Media Association is a great opportunity for networking and a great opportunity to build your network. And they post a lot of job opportunities as well. But I find that I find that if there are people in the Children's Media Association world that you're interested in meeting with, often those conversations and connections lead to opportunities to learn more. It's a lot of the word of mouth, and that's an accessible way to stay connected with a group in media.
Yeah. I think we have to wrap. It's nice it was such a small group. I put Yunah in my contact information and email in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out, to have like another conversation, we're available. And I think I'll pass it off to Dolly to close us out.
Yes, that was probably one of my favorite overviews of the industry I think that we've hosted yet. I mean, seriously, that was so well done. Thank you very much for that. I know that you put a lot of work into that, so thank you so much. And great questions from our guests. So, you know, if you hadn't thought of children's programming before as a career, I want to. You turn back the clock. Heck yeah. I mean, all the different roles, you know, that you get with all of the other, you know, kind of networks, but this children's programming is just, it's on a whole different level. So I learned so much. I want to thank everyone for your time today and your support and participation. And please stay safe. Look for our next session on October 12th. If you need anything, you can reach me at dolly@onedayimmersion.com. And thank you.